In the heart of the forest, legends awaken from the shadows. The tales of Sasquatch echo through time, a mystery that remains unsolved.
As the smoke clears, the sign stands resolute, a beacon of intrigue. What secrets lie within the forest's depths? The quest for truth begins at Sasquatch Watch Radio. Here's Billy Willard and Gary Kendrick.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is Monday, May 19th, 2025. We've got a wonderful guest on for us tonight. He's currently rebooting his computer, so we'll wait for him to come back in here. But before we get him back in, let's get our other host in here. How you doing tonight, Gary?
Hey, Billy, how is everybody tonight?
I'm doing just fine, just peachy.
I'd just like to say I want to send out, some thoughts and prayers to the people that was affected by the tornado in Kentucky. Once again, they got hit really, really hard. Let's keep them in our thoughts.
Yep, thoughts and prayers to all them. We got one thing I wanted to mention tonight is we have a new Facebook page that is allowing us to advertise. So I want to mention them and kind of invite everybody to go on over there. It's called the North America Sasquatch page. So if you type that in the search, good friend Brian runs it, and he would love it if he, gets some more folks to join on his page. They pretty much let you post and talk about anything regarding Bigfoot and Sasquatch. It seems like a decent group and doesn't look like there's any fighting and all that going on. So go over there and check him out. North America Sasquatch page on Facebook. The administrator, his name is Brian. Really cool guy. So just wanted to mention that. Yep.
I always like to see a page where you don't have people on there cutting each other down, and that's the problem in the field. Everybody wants to cut each other down.
Yep, I know. It's just one of them things, it's never ending.
Yeah.
And here's something else I decided we would start tonight. We're going to start giving some credit to all our loyal listeners. We'll start putting these guys up because these guys are on just about every show that we do. They come on and take time out of their day or their night to listen to us rattle off. So gotta give them some credit there.
I've got to throw this out there. Robert Swindle, that's my father-in-law. And he has put up with a lot of stuff with me over the years.
Oh, man, that's just hilarious. Yeah. All right. So without further ado, let's get our guest in here tonight. David, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey, Dave.
Glad to have you. Sometimes a good refresh is all that's needed.
Yes.
What I was saying to you before is I love your background.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's that blue, and I know it's a light back there. It just blends in real well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's great. So this is my co-host here, David. His name's Gary Kendrick. He's down in southwestern Virginia.
Okay.
And,
nice to meet you, sir.
He's my researcher, so he's usually the one that asks all the good questions. So I'm going to turn it right over to him, and we'll get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
All right. We got, and I hope I'm going to say this right, David Zigan.
Very close. David Zigan.
Zigan. Is that
Zigan.
Italian?
It's German.
German.
Yeah.
Okay.
Used to be Ziganki, but a long time ago they took the K-E off the end of it.
Got it.
Don't know.
Sweet. Zigan. Okay. Well, David, tell us why with your experience. Tell us about your experience at the Land Between the Lakes over the weekend and why they're not coming back.
All right. So I should preface that with I was just really angry at the time I posted that. So it was supposed to be 3 beautiful days of going to do research. I had all these plans. I had actually mapped out where I was going to put recorders and cameras all up on the ridges and where they were, where they met perfectly, where the peaks met perfectly, so I could get all the different valleys and all that. I went there early with 2 other people, and right when I showed up on that Thursday night, it started raining on me. So, it wasn't too bad. It cleared up after a while. I got to sit around and chit chat for a while, but the rain had stopped anything from us being able to do anything. And then the next day, it wasn't so bad. But, it rained in the morning, and then it cleared up. I was able to go off and drop my cameras off. Then I started noticing that I was getting a lot of ticks. My poor little dog, he was getting a lot of ticks. And it was an abnormal amount, more so than I've ever been used to. I've never really had a tick problem here in Georgia, so that was a new one for me. But I had the tall boots, I had the pants tucked in, all types of sprays, the thermal cell, everything I could think of, but it didn't really help any. So that night, we were planning on trying to do something. It looked like this storm system was going to move north of us, but the closer it got, the bigger it got. Mm-hmm. And I don't think until the last minute did it actually say. Of course, our service was spotty, and we weren't getting that great a reception. And at the last minute, it was severe thunderstorm warning. So we hung out for as long as we could. It was raining a little bit, then it rained a little harder, then the wind picked up, then the lightning and thunder came, and we were like, all right, well, let's go to our cars. And smartly, as I'm walking towards the truck with my little puppy, I was looking at my truck, and I saw it, and I thought, fiberglass or inside the cab? Because I got that topper on the back. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'll be more comfortable in the back. Nah, safety first. So I get in the front, and I had downloaded a TV show. So I had my old phone sit up there, and I was just sitting there cocked back watching. Dog's asleep in his bed, and it's lightning thundering like a normal thunderstorm. But then that wind picked up, and it didn't really die down. And I could feel that, the truck was kind of rocking a little bit. And then at one point, it actually lifted up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I know the wheels didn't lift, but I felt the truck lift a little bit more than it normally would. And it was enough to make me reach over and grab my seatbelt. So I reached over, grabbed my seatbelt, put it on, and then just laid across my little dog Murphy, thinking, well, if it's lifting my truck, maybe a tree could fall, so let's get as low as I can. And really, honestly, about 2 minutes later, my truck was rocking. Something hit the back of it. And I honestly thought, I'll be honest with you, I thought, oh, crap, out of all the things I've been through in my career, in my life, this is how I'm going to go. This is so stupid. I survived so much in my life that I want to get taken out at the LBL by a freaking tree. So I have to say this, though. Right after that tree fell, Gary Blaylock had been watching me or watching out his window, and he saw that tree hit my truck. And through that storm, he actually ran through that storm and came over and knocked on my window and checked on me.
That's Chris's husband, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So that was pretty commendable for him to do something like that. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna call it bravery.
Yeah,
not the other thing. He needed to know if
I
could have been
anything flying through the air. He ran over there.
Oh yeah, and that I got lucky. There was a giant limb underneath the trunk of the main part of the tree, and that hit the ground before it hit my truck. Ooh. So it kept that big trunk up, and the trunk just kind of bounced on top of my camper shell.
Yep.
So I got lucky because I was able to put it in 4-wheel drive and pull out and be
Yeah.
able to save everything. The camper shell's gone.
Yeah.
but,
Oh, yeah.
but the truck is fine with no dents and dings. And I was surprised after seeing the picture because I didn't get to see it until the next day.
Nice.
But yeah, the next day was beautiful. Absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Good. So at least it wasn't completely a washout then.
Yeah.
Washout. Yeah, no.
Which me and Billy talked about that earlier. There was some really big storms that went through Kentucky.
Yeah.
Really big.
Yeah, we found out that later, and I was even more grateful.
Yeah.
The ranger came, and we found out there were 5 trees down on the main road coming into the campground. And after they got through and came and told us, I told them that I said, "Well, look, that tree fell on my camper shell." And he said, "I don't mean to demean you or anything, but I've already cut out 3 campers that have been crushed by trees today."
Yep.
And I said, anyone die? And he said, no one's dead. He goes, but it was really close. He goes, they literally got like crushed.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, I didn't realize how bad it was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing. You guys got really lucky.
We did.
Well,
and the ironic thing is we canceled the first trip because of all the tornadoes that came in that area the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
a month.
and you guys are at the land between the lakes, which really I don't think gets hit as often as other parts of Kentucky. And that's kind of weird that it struck in there then, you know.
It did.
It said, "Hey, David's over here. Let's roll on through."
Yeah, I was so grateful. I had so much I wanted to do.
But that's part of Sasquatch research, I believe. If it's not storming, tearing stuff up, you know, then you're not out researching for real.
I told them I'm not going. I'm serious. I'm not going back anytime soon. They're going to have to come down to Georgia for the next trip. No, every time I've been like out of North Georgia, as soon as I cross that line, I seem to be getting ticks, storms, everything. I'm like, y'all need to come down for the next ones.
Which I think is funny because my thoughts on Georgia is, you know, I was in the military and we moved around quite a bit. I did my training in South Carolina, and everything in Georgia wants to bite, sting, or try to kill you.
All right, now that's fair. That's fair, but there's no wind trying to like pick you up and throw you. Okay.
Oh man.
Okay, I'm not going to try to go through them all, but I'm going to say this. I know you have an extensive law enforcement career, over 20 years. And
21 years, yeah.
You have got some pretty cool accreditations and things. And, you know, one of them is latent fingerprint expert. I think you even do crime scene investigations and forensic stuff.
Yes, sir.
With that in mind, how does this affect your research?
As far as going out and actually starting to look for Bigfoot, things like that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'm approaching it from a whole different perspective, it feels like. I'm sure that there's other people, and I just don't know everybody yet. So just to give you an idea, like before I went out to Land Between the Lakes, my friend told me, "Hey, you should bring a spirit box. I dare you to go into the middle of the woods by yourself at Land Between the Lakes and go hold a session." And I was like, I don't care. And so I did research on it and then tried to, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna research it. So I quickly found that there's like a misconception on how that box actually works. And it leaves a lot open for interpretation.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that like you immediately I had to start thinking about if I was going to use something like that, what type of standards would I put in place before I would say that something was more than a coincidence? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we have to do with Bigfoot research as well. To give you an example, when I took my dog on a walk, I came back and I took a picture of this paw print, and I came out and I said, y'all check out the size of this. And I had thrown my readers down next to it, and it looked like this. It legit was close to the size of my hand, looked like a dog. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I got the AI camera going.
That's right.
So it was really large, and my first thought was jokingly saying, hey, you know what? This could be a dog man, right? And I was like, and someone mentioned that someone had maybe released some red wolves there. I know they have a sanctuary there where they're breeding red wolves.
Yeah.
So, but they said that they had released some, and I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So I thought, well, shoot, maybe I might have myself a wolf paw, right? And this is, this goes straight to, you're being biased, right? You're in Land Between the Lakes, you're expecting and hoping to find something. And I'm going straight to wolf, something exotic that I really want. And on the larger one that looked much different, it ended up being a deer impression right on top of this canine impression, which made it look weird and oddly huge. It was so much larger. But then right down and below next to it, there's a regular canine impression.
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, I may or may not cast it just as a souvenir. You never know. And then later that day, lo and behold, this guy comes out there with this giant coonhound. And I go and talk to him. And apparently he brings it to that. It was a group campground that we went to. He brings it there because normally there's not many people there. And he gets to train and run the dog and let it run loose. And he comes there on a regular basis. And I was like, crap, now what if it's this giant coonhound instead of the other thing? And I was like, oh, and so for me, I'm fighting this internal battle of trying not to bias myself and get excited about possibly finding something, So there you go. But I also, what I'm carrying in my backpack is almost like a full forensics kit in case I find something, because what I'm planning on doing if I ever find something is treating it like it's an actual crime scene and kind of giving that evidence the respect it deserves if it happens to be an actual undiscovered or unknown species. And that's one of the things that I'm noticing, that people are finding something that may very well be some awesome evidence, but they're casting it as though they're just collecting it as a souvenir. And they're not documenting everything properly ahead of time before they cast it, or they're not casting it properly because truly it's a souvenir and they want to hold it up and say, look what I found when I went out. And that's not really contributing anything to any type of real research or anything like that. And my whole point in learning how to cast something properly, besides documenting everything before you even get to the casting process, is what happens if there were some really good details in there another expert would have recognized, even one that I may not have recognized, but someone else like Meldrum may have recognized, that would help further something or further the study for that area, and maybe, or it lends it more credibility. But if you don't cast it properly, you lose some of those details instead of just, taking it as a souvenir. So I know no one's going to ever go to the extent that I would, should we find something, or, should I find something, but I'm hoping that if I can get the word out, at least maybe they do a little bit of it. That way, when someone like me comes across it on the internet or something, I don't just keep clicking and go by. Because that's honestly how this whole thing started for me. I decided as a fingerprint and crime scene forensic guy that I was going to see if I could find some good dermal ridges on a Bigfoot impression because I'd heard they existed. So I went on the internet, didn't find it, didn't find what I was looking for. But what I did find were a bunch of impressions that I thought looked very interesting, but they were photographed incorrectly, so I couldn't really look at them. So then I ended up just going to the next one, going to the next one. And about that time, that's when I realized that, holy crap, about 5 pictures ago, I could have actually been looking at a real Bigfoot footprint, and no one's ever going to know.
Right.
You know, like that was just done. And I was like, well, how can I help fix this? And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, good. Hey, just out of curiosity, what do you think about the new LiDAR scanners that they can use to collect impressions?
If they're actually using LiDAR, then that's a wonderful thing.
Okay.
But like something like the Scaniverse app that's like on the Android,
Right.
That's photogrammetry. It's not
Right.
actually, and we tested it to see if it was a quick like cheat that we could use, but we quickly found out that it looks really, really good when you do the impression or something that's on uneven ground like rocks or clay or something.
Right.
It looks wonderful until you put something smooth like a ruler or a scale next to it, and then it doesn't actually piece it together properly.
Got it.
So that means that forensically, court purposes, we couldn't use it because we can't actually conduct any real measurements. Because now if it's distorting the straight ruler, that means it's distorting the evidence. But the stuff with the LiDAR, absolutely all day long. My friends even, I have a lab partner who's getting his doctorate in bloodstain pattern analysis. And he's actually using an app that a friend of his developed that has actually been through the court process already. And it's using the LiDAR, and from his iPhone, he's taking like court ready scans. And they're beautiful. They're beautiful. I don't think anything like that exists on the Android yet because they don't have LiDAR. They're just using photogrammetry. But LiDAR, yeah, that's where it's at.
Cool. Sorry, Gary, didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's a good question, Billy. I was going to hit on something similar to that. But with that being said, with all of your investigative background and, you know, your law enforcement and all that other stuff, why investigate Sasquatch?
It started as a joke. Honestly, I was a turkey hunter, outdoors person, and had a group of other guys from the department that we leased some land together up in Adairsville, Georgia. And we spent a good amount of time up there. And I had a few strange things. Strange things that happened in the woods. I've already had paranormal things that happened to me, so that just left me with an open mind. So I didn't automatically dismiss Bigfoot. I thought at first it was a joke, you know, kind of a fun thing, and that's when I was like, well. And then me and one of the guys that went out there, we used to watch all the Bigfoot TV shows around the fire, have a whiskey or something, you know, and just enjoy ourselves. And then I had a few experiences, like I said, out in the woods, because what I used to do is I'd go out the evening before and go looking for where the turkeys are going to roost. You know, got to stalk them, find them, follow them till they roost, and then mark their spot so you can come back in the morning. So that meant that when they roosted, it was dark. And I had to make my way back to camp by myself. And several times on that way back, I had some pretty weird experiences. I'd seen some strange things, and I never knew what it was. I'm still not going to attribute it to Bigfoot because I got no proof, right? But it leaves the door open for unexplained things happening out there, and I know they do. And I've had my friend who is he's an ex-sniper, and he called me one evening. He used to go camping out there by himself, and he called me one evening really upset. He just wanted to be on the phone with me for a little while. And I had jokes, of course, you know, you're a sniper, you know, what are you doing calling me, just wanting to be on the phone with me? And he told me that right at our own base camp, he heard a loud, what he would now describe as the typical Bigfoot howl. And he said it echoed through camp, and he could feel it in his chest. And it unnerved him enough that he wanted to be on the phone with me, but he wasn't leaving. And I said, well, where are you at? He's like, I'm still by the fire. I said, get in the truck. Like, what the hell? I was dumbfounded. I was like, what do you mean you're by the fire? Get in the truck. God. And, I've heard that now that it's amazing. You think sometimes because you're in law enforcement or, even military, that you think clearly in all those situations. And then it throws that OODA loop off, right? And then you're just like, you forget to make that one decision just because you're so like, what the hell was that?
Right.
Because, I've had something follow me through the woods that was hissing at me and I couldn't figure it out what it was. And I ended up taking a wrong turn for a little while because I was too busy trying to move on away from it. And I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. So, we all do silly things when weird stuff happens to us.
That's right.
But as far as the law, how I got into Bigfoot, it was just organic over a period of time with watching those shows with my friends, and then one day realizing that, hey, you know what? I could actually contribute to some of this if I could get to the right people. I quickly found out that a lot of people don't actually want to know the answer.
Well, that's true.
They just want to have the experience, which is fine. Or they just, I think sometimes they're worried, like maybe even subconsciously they're worried about if the mystery is gone, what happens then? And that's a big question for everyone to think about. Yeah. What would happen if we proved it? What would happen if we disproved it? It would change everything. It might take away some of these shows, right? So
right.
Because the mystery's gone.
That's right.
So I did have a few people that, some of the big names that I reached out to. I had like a blanket abstract or /email saying what I wanted to research, what I wanted to do. I sent it out to a lot of people. I got one good reply. Most didn't reply at all. But I had one good one. And now he sends me casts and things like that may have dermal ridges or things like that. And I provide an actual, like, very long, 12 pages to 18 page, like, forensic report on the actual cast and what I found and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that one day I actually get something across my desk that I go, holy crap, look at this.
Yeah.
And still I have to abide by everyone's privacy. For some reason, a lot of people want to keep their findings private, which I don't understand. In my world, if you find something, you write about it and you share it with everybody.
Yeah. I think especially particularly for landowners, they don't want people chomping around on their property. That's one of the deals that we have up here in Virginia is we have a property owner up here that's got like 100+ acres, and her whole thing was, we just don't want people just unexpectedly coming on the property, and that's the main part of it. So we've kind of kept the location under wraps, but as far as activity, you want some activity, that's where you want to go.
It's
hot right now. It's hot here. I just took the dogs out before I came in, and I was like, "Oh, come on, stop!"
But now I'll tell you, as far as like where I live at, I'm small town, Southwest Virginia. I'm right on the border of Kentucky, right on the border of West Virginia. We're real close to Tennessee, North Carolina, and all that. And people here don't want to talk about it because they don't want, the stigma. Oh, well, he's a Bigfooter. That don't faze me. I don't care. But a lot of people around here, especially the older generation, they don't want to talk about it because that was things that was not talked about. They don't want people to think that they're crazy or, whatever. So it's kind of that small town mentality, I think.
Yeah. I was nervous about that at first, still being active law enforcement. And at first, no one really said anything. You know, occasionally they'd make a joke here and there. You know, oh, maybe it was Bigfoot. Did you find Bigfoot this weekend? You know, stuff like that. And now, after having been, you know, doing it for a while, they'll actually, you know, be traveling around and they'll just send me a picture and go, "Hey, I saw this Bigfoot statue. I was thinking about you when I saw it." You know, now it's just commonplace and they don't care. As well, you know, some of them saw, you know, when I originally was going to do videos and stuff like that, and then they saw the stuff that I was writing, and they went, "Oh, okay, so you're keeping it straight laced and scientific," you know, and I have to since I'm still law enforcement. I have to, because I know my agency occasionally they go through our social media. Our defense attorneys do too. So I have to watch exactly what I say, and I don't have a problem with that because I'm really trying to stay exactly where I'm at right now, honestly.
Right.
And that's what I like about the group that I'm with right now is they allow me to. Wayne Tothrow, I think that's how you say his last name, Tothrow. He's been calling me the party pooper lately. You know, because they're like, "What about this?" And I'm like, "You mean that Eastern screech owl?" You know, like you know, like stuff like that. I mean, he didn't confuse an Eastern screech owl. That was just an exaggeration for an example. But it is like I easily could have, and I took a picture of 2 trees leaning one way, 2 trees leaning another way, and as you come around them, you can make them look like a tree structure in your photograph. And I took a picture of them and went back and I said, "You know, that's just behind my truck over there." They're like, "Oh my God." And they ran over and they couldn't find it. And so I was like, you know, it's just an example of, you know, there's ethics that need to come into play too with all of this. Because I can't tell you how many times where I've seen something I thought was interesting and I reached out to the people and was like, "Hey, do you mind if I get, you know, one of your good photos and take a look at it?" And then all of a sudden it becomes like a wavy kind of, "Oh, well, you know, we had a hard time we don't really have any good photos of that, you know, didn't really come out well." And I'm like, "But you said." You said. So, you know, and I've seen that quite a bit, and you know, it's human nature. People need content. We're content driven right now, and so they're going to let some things slide. That way, they can keep producing. And I get it, but you shouldn't get mad at people that you're asking. I honestly, I think the science side. I think that I'm finding a lot of people just like having the excuse that science isn't paying attention. But when we do and we try, I don't see them really accepting and wanting the actual help.
A lot of times that's the case.
Billy, if you don't care, I'm going to post this right here real quick so everybody can take a look at it. David Rotsky. Researchers, content creators, and the thousands upon thousands of people with an interest in the topic will show up, knock on your door, trespass on your property, all in hopes of an encounter. And that's true. A lot of people will. I don't agree with that. You know, if somebody doesn't want you there, don't be there. I mean, that's, you know, everybody's got their own right to privacy.
Oh, and I totally agree with that. When I was talking earlier, I meant you can post your research, you can post your evidence and have it done properly without disclosing a location.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
100%.
And that's really what I was getting at. I mean, you can write a whole paper, like I can write a whole paper on this cast over here and never tell you where it came from.
Exactly.
You know,
and to be honest, a lot of people don't need to know where it come from, because they're going to come in there and set up and ruin any further encounter that might happen there.
Right. All right. So I talked to David earlier in the week and I asked him what kind of music he likes. So he told me, he goes, "Well, when I'm out in the yard, I like listening to some country western." I said, "Okay." So we're going to play some country western music about David. Here we
Oh,
go.
God.
Here we go, guys.
In the shadow of the Georgia pines, where the whispers turn to roars, walks a man named David Zigan with a purpose at his core. By day he solves the riddles on crime scenes dark and strange. By night he's chasing footsteps where the great unknown remains. He's trod the muddy hollows where the creeks run wild and wide, traces print to print in silence with the forest as his guide. The skills he's honed in darkness at scenes of blood and dust lend him eyes of sharp precision and secrets earned he trusts. David Zigan under Georgia's moonlit skies, hunting truth through tangled woods where legends lie. The tools of his trade know no bounds or walls, for Bigfoot may yet answer David's call. He's seen the hair that clings to bark, the broken branches torn, catalog it analyzed till the mystery's reborn. Plaster casts of heavy steps leading nowhere fast, yet he chases through the shadows while questions amass. Some say he's chasing shadows, a fool on a winding trail, but Zigan knows the forest speaks through secrets faint and frail. He uses all he's learned before, every clue, every sign, dreaming of the day he'll meet those eyes in the pine. David Zigan under Georgia's moonlit sky, hunting truth through tangled woods where legends lie. The tools of his trade know no bounds or walls, for Bigfoot may yet answer David's call.
There's your new song to listen to while you're doing the lawn work out back.
Boy,
All right.
the only way that could have been better is if Willie Nelson would have been singing. That was really close. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Oh my.
Well, that brings me into my next subject. Tell us
Well,
about
Willie Nelson.
No, well, we'll get into Willie later. Tell us about your YouTube channel, Bigfoot Forensics, and I'm just going to say, if it doesn't have a theme song, it probably does now.
Yeah, so that particular show, that started with just like what I was telling you. I was trying to teach people how to collect evidence properly, and just trying to add, a little thing here, a little thing there, trying to be helpful. Learning new things, and in the back of my mind, I was hoping that maybe some people, we always talk in the Bigfoot community about being open-minded, but that I'm hoping that people will be open-minded to understanding that it's not always paranormal. It's not always Bigfoot. And you have to be open-minded yourself to accept that sometimes it's just a weird ass bird that you've never seen before or never heard before. Because the more and more I still, after all these years of being out in the woods, I'm still hearing stuff I've not heard before, and I'm still trying to identify it, but I keep learning and learning and learning. And ultimately, those things help you decide which direction you're going to go and investigate. Right. Cause we've heard noises that was an owl clacking its beak. And that's why I came up with that show before. I twisted the thing that it could maybe sound like a tree knock, which it wouldn't, but if it was up close to a mic that you weren't around and it was up close, it could sound like a tree knock. But I had heard a sound of an owl clacking its beak in the woods, and I didn't know what the heck that thing was until I discovered that owls could do that. And then I was like, well, crap, that's one more thing I got to put in my head. Just like I deploy cameras out on my truck when I go camping. And in a place I thought I was in the middle of nowhere, 3 freaking domesticated cats came out of the woods. And I was thinking, well, Coyote should have got you guys a long time ago, right? Well, they come out in the woods and check out my camp. And I was like, great. So one more weird noise I have to keep in mind, but, there's all kinds of, new things that you stumble across and see that has a logical explanation. And the more and more I can learn about those, then I can exclude those things so I can actually recognize what's not normal. And so that, along with learning how to collect stuff properly, and that's really all I was after. And that's why I wrote that book, Casting Bigfoot Evidence. Each chapter is dedicated to casting an impression in a different type of soil or substrate, sand or mud or something like that. And it was designed to be a guide to take with you. I'm just trying to, if you're going to go collect evidence and call yourself a researcher, then take it seriously. If it's just for having fun, then I accept that too. That's fine. That's fun. Everyone has their different reason for being out there. I think what's the people at conferences, getting paid to speak and calling themselves researchers, I kind of wish they would take that a little bit more seriously. That's and I get, if you want to be honest and say, this is entertainment, then great. But presenting it as research, I think that needs to be taken seriously, because if you think about it, for the last how many years or decades has anything really changed in the way we're approaching this investigation? Or are we just steadily just keeping it the same, or even making it worse with social media and stuff like that? I don't know. It's still fun for me too, but in a different way, because now I'm writing a whole new book. And the more I research and study, the more I learn, and that's fun for me. So that's why I hadn't done so many videos lately. I kind of gotten into the real research side of it, going down rabbit holes. So I know I was just kind of rambling. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm just going to tell the guest, if you haven't checked out David's YouTube channel, it's Bigfoot Forensics, and I went through it, and it is there's some excellent videos up there. I mean, some really informative stuff. So y'all check it out. It's pretty interesting. David, the next thing I want to talk about is you do things with forensic science, and to do things with forensic science, you have to be willing to say, no, that is not what this is. And you have posted your opinion several times. One thing I'd like to talk about is the Onion Mountain Cast and your study of the Onion Mountain Cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that particular thing, I was honestly dumbfounded when, I told you I started looking for casts that had dermal ridges. And obviously that's one of the first ones that comes up. So I start reading it. and I finally get a hold, which I also think is funny. What I'm about to say is there aren't that many good pictures of it. They're actually, it's pretty hard to find. Luckily, Matt Crowley helped me out with that. Right. So I'm looking at, what he wrote about, and he started calling them desiccation ridges, or artifacts, casting artifacts. And I'm looking at this, and I'm really, really, I was disheartened, honestly. I was dumbfounded because I was thinking this, in the 80s, they start really looking at this and having debates on whether they're dermal ridges or not. And I know times have changed for training wise for forensics and latent fingerprint examiners. And I know that's changed. But for something as serious as saying you found dermal ridges on a possible undiscovered, Bigfoot or, hominin or whatever you want to call it, you would have thought that they would have had like some really good experts looking at this. And the first thing I see is the vertical ridges running on the outside of this cast. And immediately I knew that, well, those aren't friction ridges. I don't even need to look at them. They're vertical. They're on the outside. That's not how ridges form. Every fingerprint person who's gone through, the hundreds of hours of classes that I've been through know that can't happen. So I was like, okay, well, I don't even need to look at that one. Those aren't ridges. That's either casting artifacts or something that was on the ground in the substrate, but they just weren't ridges. So, and I'm not saying the cast itself wasn't real, right? Because I don't know that, but I can say that those are definitively not dermal ridges. And just knowing how friction ridges form on anything that's growing, those aren't. And I was saddened to think that that's been out there and up for debate for so long, and that it had to go through Matt Crowley doing those experiments to recreate them. And I was thinking, man, it took me less than a couple seconds to look at it and go, oh, well, next, that's not it. And then I ended up coming back to it because it made me mad. And I was thinking, all these years, why has nobody actually even talked about this on how they actually form and how they couldn't be there to begin with? And so, so it's one of those things that I look for when I get a cast, or I look for on a fingerprint or a footprint or a handprint, is you find these ridges, these dermal ridges, and the first thing I'm going to do is use their shape and flow and form to help me orientate which direction it's going to be so I can look at it properly. So when I see long things that they're calling dermal ridges, I know that doesn't go anywhere. Right. So, unless sometimes in the center on certain primates, it can be small, and I hate to be so negative, but you're right. I gotta say it. You have to. Well, you have to. I
mean, people have. Sometimes when you beat around the bush, it doesn't help nobody. You just have to be straight with them. Now I know you just come into this over the last few years. Did you ever do any research on Jimmy Chilcutt?
Yes, I have.
Okay. What is your thoughts?
I've talked with him several times on the phone. Texted quite a bit. I actually tried to buy all of his impressions and research that he supposedly did off of all those non-human primates. I'm not going to blast them on the air, but I can say that definitely, there's been some misrepresentations. I don't think intentionally, maybe just from the time period and the type of training that was given. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we also have in this in the Bigfoot community when we're talking about researching, when we make claims about scientific matters, especially with using things like me as an expert, right? Even I, who's testified expert witness, as for latent fingerprints and stuff like that, down at Superior Court on homicides and things like that, I have my work peer reviewed and tech reviewed before we go to court. And we don't get to just say I'm an expert it's my call and here it is, and expect everybody to accept it.
Yep.
I actually, before it's allowed to go to court, I actually have this thing called a verification process, and it has to it's basically like a blind lineup. They actually do it themselves, come to a conclusion, and then they send it back to me, and I check to see if they came to the same conclusion. And if they don't, then there's the matter of, I mean, even if it's slightly different, there's the matter of what do we do from that point? How do we handle it? So that means we actually have to get together and hold a meeting and talk about scientifically, this is why I chose, this is why I said this, here's all my examples and my thing. And then they talk, and then we hash it out and we come to an agreement. And if we don't come to an agreement, then it goes to the lesser. So if I said something was an ID and this examiner says, I see what you're saying, but for me, I can only go inconclusive, and they put their foot down, I have to respect that decision. And now, no matter what I think, even though it was my ID, it now becomes inconclusive. And there's nothing I can do about it. Right. But right now we have an issue where we're hanging our hat on a whole bunch of people we're calling experts in their fields, and no one's checking their work. But we are not going to do that because it fits our narrative, right? Right. And even those experts, I haven't really seen them like tell people, I'm sorry, that's not what you think it is, except for one or two, right? Some of them are like, oh, I don't know. And they'll just say, well, maybe it's, I don't think there's enough information there. I would say it's just inconclusive. There's no real way to tell, because they don't want to alienate their viewers or something like that, right. So and I get it. You have shows, you have fans, you have things you got to do, right. And you start putting people down. That's why I don't think I would be good at this kind of show that you guys have, because I would hear some crazy and I'd have to really bite my tongue and be like, dude, really, do you hear what you sound like? I mean, I don't know, maybe it would be funny, but I think after a while I wouldn't be able to get anyone to come on. I think people would enjoy hearing it, but I couldn't get gas.
Yeah, we've always kind of went by the philosophy that we let people come on and tell their part, tell their story. We, let's face it, we're all human, and we automatically come to a judgment in our minds, but we try to let them speak and just, stay respectful,
Oh, of course.
So,
I think at some point too, when we're letting everyone tell their stories and we're agreeing with them, that helps fuel the fire.
Right.
And because one of the things I see like on Facebook, I swear, that red circle thing over the blown up pixels. And then you actually have, 30, 40 people right below it commenting, good catch. Right?
Yeah, I know.
And half of them is because they're Facebook friends with them and they just want to be supportive.
Right.
So they're like, oh, good catch. And I'm like, but I don't say anything. I haven't been saying anything. I make little jokes like that. I don't know if you saw the post I made of the painting with the little red circle that says Bigfoot's here.
Right.
With an arrow, right. So I make little jokes like that when I get upset.
Right.
And it's my way of venting without pissing off anybody. So
yeah, we've actually told several researchers, look, just don't put a red circle around it, okay?
I was one of them. Because I had a picture that had something interesting, and I was like, I want them to see what I'm trying to look at. I don't know what it is. So I put a circle around it, and as soon as it hit, Billy said, don't do that.
Okay. So, I mean, passing around internally and circling it and going, hey, what do you think this is one thing. Posting it on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and going, look what I found. And you're circling a bunch of weird pixels. then I'm like, yeah, I see that brown, black, and gray pixel. Yeah.
David
Right.
Roxy has a really good question, but it's kind of long, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit that real quick. As someone trained in crime scene forensics and latent fingerprint analysis, what kind of physical evidence would you consider most compelling? And then here's the other part. Or scientifically valid in confirming the existence of Sasquatch? And have you ever encountered any trace evidence that comes close to meeting those standards?
Okay, trace evidence, there's not going to be a standard because there's no known sample, right? So even if you collected a hair now, you got supposed experts out there claiming, so what is it, that Bigfoot hair doesn't have a medulla, right?
Right.
All right, well, most human hairs don't have a medulla, so there's a problem there, right? We have all kinds. We have it's broken. Sometimes we actually have medullas, but the majority of us don't. So to automatically go, well, this is, like a reddish color. It doesn't have a medulla, so it must be Bigfoot. We don't have a known sample that we've taken from Bigfoot to say, to actually do that comparison. So in my world, it is that cut and dry. I get that it's not in the Bigfoot world. I understand. Because I'm looking at everything where could I make a logical argument in a court of law with what I have? And I'm going to continue to think that way. And I know also hair evidence really is not even valuable except for DNA extraction in my world. Because the most you could ever say with hair, say I got 2 hairs off of you and I didn't tell a hair examiner, the most they're going to be allowed to say in court is this hair is the same color, shape, same medulla pattern, and it's consistent with having come from someone with the same type of hair. They can only say it's consistent with. And that's a problem if you're going to look at hair that way for trying to identify Bigfoot hair. If we can't even say that about human hair in a court, I don't know how we're going to do it with Bigfoot hair. So it's got to go to the DNA side. And then what's the problem with that? Again, we don't have a known sample. What we do have is what we could do, and I know a few researchers that are working on this, is they're working on the full DNA profile extracted from the hair. And that's different from a DNA profile of trying to identify the hair came from my DNA, right? Because you're only sequencing so many patterns. So when you're just trying to look at the full makeup, we're talking so much information. So if you can find that, like say in Virginia, and then match that same DNA, an unknown DNA, over in say Washington State, and then somewhere else. Now you're having a bunch of unknowns. You're never going to know where it came from. But you need to submit it to all those, those biological databases so they can come back as it's not any of our known animals in our databases. And then we have the genetic profile and the unknown. And then, got the eDNA studies that are coming out and stuff like that. And if you can start matching some of those with some of those unknown hair patterns, unknown hair DNA patterns, and that'll be great too. But unfortunately, there's no real standard. As far as what would I consider some really good evidence for me personally on the fingerprint side is I would like to see one of those giant footprints with an unbroken friction ridge pattern going from one side to the other. I was told, well, not told, I'm sorry, not told. I read in Krantz's paper that he wrote in the Skeptical Inquirer, back in the 80s when he was talking about all of Freeman's casts that he was touting were having all these dermal ridges on them. That paper is horrible. It talks about the friction ridge examiners, fingerprint examiners saying that he actually saw a fingerprint pattern or finger ridges going from one side to the other, so it had to be one impression. But he doesn't show any pictures of it. He only shows pictures of the other ones that are spotty. something here, something here, something here. And I'm like, well, if that one was so good, why are you showing these? Right. And then I had an issue with his paper with, he kept speaking for the examiners. You know, the examiner told me this, the examiner told me that, but nothing was in actual quotes, and there were no papers done. You know, like like those examiners didn't actually write anything down about it. They just talked to him on the phone, and he wrote in his paper what they told him on the phone. And I was like, you know, there's no checks and balances there, right? So there's a problem. But if I could get what he claimed in front of me, you know, like a giant cast the size of the Elkins cast with actual friction ridges that go from one side to the other, then I'd be pretty freaking ecstatic, you know, because I'd be like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying, if that's true, that is something very important. To be able to follow that pattern from one side to the other on something that large. That is a big deal, because I can't put my foot down in exactly the right spots side by side and have those line up. It's just not going to happen. You can never do that.
Right.
Dang it. I got
Interesting.
putting my hands up.
That is very interesting information, you know, because you almost have to have the perfect soil strata to get something like that.
So then there's that, right? And then you have to have the right foot. And what I mean by that is, during my research, in order to be able to say, hey, I don't believe those are dermal ridges. I believe those were patterned from the dermal papillae of the bottom of a bear paw. It dawned on me that I can't say that unless I've studied bear paws. So crap. So for the past 4 or 5 months, I have been working with several zoos and sanctuaries, and I've been getting different like close-up photographs, but you know, it has to be done while they're being looked at medically, when they're put under anesthesia. Because you can't just walk up to a bear and manipulate their paw and take pictures of it. So it's a very slow process, but I've gotten to partake myself several times and be in the enclosure and hold the bear paw and photograph it myself. And what I'm seeing is and it's to be expected. It's just, you know, to see it in person is, I don't know, it just means more, I guess, when you see, because once a year in the wild, in more colder climates, when the bear goes in torpor, it's like hibernation, but it's not. Bears don't actually hibernate.
Right.
They go into that slow, sleepy thing, and they'll come out, go back, wake up, you know, whenever the temperature fluctuates. But they're not like us, where we lose our skin cells. You know, we slough off our skin cells, you know, every 30 days on our feet and our hands. You know, they just keep rebuilding, regenerating, and sloughing off. The bears don't get to do that. It either rubs off while they're walking, which doesn't really happen as much, but they usually just build up heavy, thick calluses. And then during their denning cycle, they will actually lose their paw pads, the skin off their paw pads, in one big shedding event. And when they do, it becomes like that pink color, skin color, whatever their hands are, or whatever their paws are, and it'll expose those dermal papillae, so you can actually see patterns. So they have raised, you know, I call them dermal papillae. They're conical. They actually look like the bottom of a dog paw, right? You know, they raise up, and it's like a bunch of little dots. But when they're not calloused, they can actually form what looks like ridges on hands and stuff like that in certain areas. And then when they start to grow up, they'll fold over top of each other and do the same thing. And then when they step in the mud and stuff like that, it will actually look like ridges in certain areas. So you can have bear paws and bear impressions that actually look like they have friction ridges or dermal ridges inside them. And that can get confusing. And so I'm writing a paper on it. It ended up being, it was going to be for Bigfoot stuff, but now it's turned more into a professional paper that I'll be submitting. But what I found was it depends on where they live, you know, like in these sanctuaries where they're walking a lot, they've hardened and packed that dirt. So their paws are getting more and more calloused. And then you got the bears who have a more forested kind of like leafy environment, and theirs aren't as much. So you're getting, and I started thinking about that with Bigfoot, right? Depending on where he's living, where, you know, where he's walking. So if he's walking in hard, rocky clay areas all the time, he's going to have calluses on his feet, and there's not going to be any friction ridges to find, right? For something that heavy that's walking on things, I would expect them to callus up just like a bear would. I don't know how they're shedding their, you know, we don't know anything about the creature if it exists, on how they're actually getting, how they shed or what the patterns may look like, but just something to consider, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting information.
I got one more here from the chat, Billy, and then I'm going to ask my last question, if that's okay.
No,
Yeah,
got it.
Based on the collective body of evidence currently, or this is by David, I'm sorry. Based on the collective body of evidence we currently have, such as video footage, footprint cast, forensic trace evidence, photographs, and documentary eyewitness reports, do you believe a compelling case could be made in court to argue Bigfoot's existence?
I don't know all the evidence that exists, because remember, I've only been doing this for like a year and a half, 2 years. I would think that there could be, remember, because with the court, you're talking to jurors, right? So sometimes I can see where, you know, they get fascinated by the subject, especially like in crime scene and things like that. If you have a good expert witness, I think, I mean, I know what he's asking, but I've not seen anything definitive on my end. So I'm hesitant to speak for evidence that's not in my specialty, right? Because I you know, I've been trained not to speculate on things that aren't mine. So cast wise with thermal ridges, I have some inconclusives. I don't have anything yet that I've gone, holy crap. I don't have that yet. But as a compilation of all of that evidence that he's talking about, I feel like it would be really, really easy as a defense attorney to destroy it in court, honestly. I just feel like it would be an easy thing to do. So presenting your evidence is one thing, because remember, you have a defense attorney who gets to attack the evidence.
That's right.
It's not as simple as just presenting it to the court and seeing if you can, you know, get the yay. You're going to have someone who's going to play devil's advocate and come after you. And I think the easiest thing to do on all of our stuff is chain of custody, contamination, just not documenting it well, so there's no context. All, you know, all those are just simple little things that gets evidence thrown out,
Right.
and that's kind of where I was coming at with, you know, with some of those shows with, all right, yeah, you might have a great footprint. Now let's take a photograph of it the right way. Now let's show where it was. And I'm sorry if you have something in the background that'll make people think that a Bigfoot would never be there because there's an apartment building over there. But if he was, the evidence is what it is. You don't get to choose.
Right.
So yeah, what if he was? Do it right so we can see,
Yep.
and then let everybody make the, come to the conclusion. But you don't get to pick and choose how you show what was there. That's not how things are done. But unfortunately, right now, I think it would be easy to destroy pretty much all the stories.
Yep.
Things need to change if you want to be able to do it at that level.
Understandable. Okay, this is my last question, I promise. And this one is weird.
Okay. I like weird.
Year.
My sergeant used to call me and go, Zigan, you like those weird cases, right? And I'm like, no. And he's like, come here. So go ahead, hit me.
All right, I want to explain this one as I go. It's animal, mineral, or vegetable. Animal, do you believe that Bigfoot is a physical living animal? Mineral, do you believe that Bigfoot is maybe extraterrestrial or interdimensional? Or vegetable, do you believe that Bigfoot is spiritual? Or do you think it may be a combination of any of those?
So I'm going to look at the evidence, right? So law enforcement, especially, I wasn't always crime scene. I was a crimes against persons detective, robbery, homicide, stuff like that. I also was, I just quit doing polygraphs about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. Because I specialized in interviews and interrogations, things like that. So one of the things that we look for are patterns, right? And I started noticing lots of different types of patterns. And I know it's like uncool to say, any rate, something's making footprints. I'll give you that. All right. I think something is there making footprints. I have some people that I trust, and I've seen some great photos. Not been there in person, which kind of sucked because I wanted to be, like there was things I wanted to be able to see that I couldn't. But this particular person that sends me things, I have to say that a lot of that, I believe that something is out there making prints. I give you that. Now, whether it is just an undiscovered hominid or, non-human primate type of thing, I can't say that for sure. I've seen some stuff in the woods that apparently coincides with some Bigfoot sightings. And just because you believe one thing doesn't mean that the other evidence. All right, I mean, and it goes both ways. You got orbs, lights, weird lights, things like that sometimes coincides with Bigfoot sightings. Are they a coincidence? It's hard to say that they would be. But at the same time, just like in any type of evidence collecting, it's circumstantial at best, right? You got a sighting here, you got something else here. It's rare that you would have those things happen at the same time together. Like that's a weird anomaly, right? But at the same time, you can't say that they're related. There's no way to know. I do think it's strange that some Native Americans and Native American lore will tell you that like I heard one talk about how one just kneeled down right in front of them and just disappeared, or just kind of like walked off and slowly disappeared, but not like vanishing behind trees, just kind of did that. So you see patterns and it makes you question, like there's so many questions that I have, obviously, because my mind jumps from, if it's undiscovered, then why haven't we gotten more? Why haven't we done more in all these years that everybody's doing this? I'm not going to go into conspiracy theory and say the government knows and they're hiding all of this from us and that's what's happening. That seems like a catch-all for almost everything, nowadays. And they very well could be, I don't know. But that's the thing, I don't know. But I'm not going to hang my hat on it and say that's the excuse. But do I believe it could be? I mean, my joke a long time ago with my partner at work, my lab partner, he'll tell you Bigfoot's interdimensional, and don't argue with him because he knows a lot about quantum physics and stuff like that. And you'll find yourself going, well, crap, I don't know enough to argue. Shoot, but because he was like, argue with me, tell me he's not, I'm like, well, shit, I can't. I'm not. That's not my area of expertise. So I'm going to leave the door open, but I'm not going to shut it on. I'm not going to go spiritual. I'm going to exclude just spiritual, unless spiritual is becoming corporeal and leaving footprints. And then you start wondering, well, is that spiritual or interdimensional, right? You tell me. But I would say for me, I would get rid of spiritual, and then I'd make it a toss-up of I can't make a determination whether it is an interdimensional alien type of thing versus just undiscovered primate.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Only because I don't have enough information to go by.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. None of us do.
Nope. That's for sure.
What is your belief?
Well, again, I have always said that I believe that it's flesh and blood. Something like you had mentioned earlier, something's leaving footprints. So it almost has to be a physical animal, person, whatever, that's leaving these footprints. That's my thought on it.
I get stuck. I'm an animal guy. I believe it's some type of flesh and blood type animal. But where I get stuck at most of the time is between hominid and hominin. It's either an undiscovered great ape, or it might be a classification of Homo. I don't know. Like you said, you have a lot of Native American tales where they go in and say, they call it Big Brother or Elder Brother, or they call them tribes. This is a tribe, or this is the stick people. And they tend to, have a more human side to it when they mention it.
That's honestly, I think if I had to choose and you forced me to choose between undiscovered ape or more of a person type of thing, I think I would go more towards closer to human. Only for it would explain more. I mean, I get that we didn't discover, the chimpanzees to a certain time, the gorillas to a certain time. I get that. But they weren't living in the forest just outside, the national forest just outside my house, right?
Mm-hmm. All right.
And all over the U.S., the sightings all over the United States. I would think that either it's the intelligence level is to a certain extent, or the evolution of this particular animal has some things that we don't quite understand yet that enables it to remain so elusive. Was it Matt Pruitt? I can't remember if it was in his book or I had a conversation with him, but he was talking about the tigers, the people who were trying to film the Siberian tiger, and it kept coming up behind the cameras and destroying the cameras on the trees. And they finally had to double up the cameras, one watching another, and they got sneaking up to the camera and reaching around and destroying it.
Right.
And my first thought was, well, shoot, that's a tiger of all things. What about something with an actual intelligence level? And let's not forget, I know that a lot of us like to camouflage our trail cameras and stuff like that. But even when I cover mine with moss and things like that, I can still pick it off myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're used to, and if this is, if the forest is your environment, anything weird is going to stand out. So, I mean, you've got to be really, really good at hiding something like that, like in a hole of a tree or something like that, without covering it with moss, because the moss is hiding it from us. It's not hiding it from animals.
Right.
I left my recorders covered, and I had covered them in moss and everything. And I was listening to one of them today while I was typing, and I got footsteps coming up to it, and something sniffing it, pushing it around. And I had this thing like underneath a dead tree, all leafed in, and something came right up to it and starts pushing it around. I was like, son of a gun. I was like, okay, well, I didn't descent it, so that's probably the big deal right there. But I just think, and any person who's a big time hunter will tell you that there's some stuff that just really stands out to you, like if a human's been there, versus, other things, even the way the leaves are, you can say, oh, somebody's been walking through here. You can tell that it wasn't a deer or something. Because like I was just on a trail, and I saw a bunch of shuffling in the leaves, and I was like, well, crap. All right, that's not a deer. What the heck's been walking so clumsily through here? And I was like, probably a bear. I'm looking at this trail on the top of the ridge line, and I'm like, okay, yeah. But because I was like, I didn't make that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unknown stuff, and I'm going to leave it open until I get more information.
The one thing that I kind of lean on, that's what keeps me torn between the two, is I see a lot of intelligence in Sasquatch, but I don't really see human intelligence. Okay. I don't see any tool making. I don't see any fire use, anything like that. But I see a high level of intelligence, of animal intelligence. Their camouflage and the way they hide, the way they move. Like you said, they know their environment, things like that. And that's what kind of keeps me torn between the two.
I don't know. I think my issue is I know something is out there. I don't know what it is. I've seen red floating lights myself twice. I've had something follow me. One time while something was up on the ridge walking to the back behind my right, and then down in the valley. It wasn't a big valley. It was just like the kind you set a deer stand on and overlook a small little valley for hunting. And I'm walking about a quarter down on a little trail, and I got something walking back behind me, and at the same time there's a little red light floating. It looks like a drone light, just moving really slow. When I first saw it, I thought it was a cigarette butt, like someone had a cigarette.
Yep.
And I was like, son of a, wait a minute, that's red. And it's just moving really slow like this. And it was just moving along. And then it passed me, and I forgot about the steps behind me for a second. And then I was like, oh, crap. And I started trying to pay attention to that. And when I looked down, the light was gone.
Yep.
And then one other time, we were actually sitting around the fire, and it was my brother brought his son. It's his first time camping. He was 10. So we figured hunting property for first time camping. Let's do this. And he said, Uncle David, what's that? And I looked over, and there's that damn red light again moving through the forest. And my brother drew his gun, and I just sat there, and I was like, oh, thank God. Right? I was like, oh, thank God. And he was like, what? I'm like, someone else saw it besides me. I was like, thank you. That makes me feel better. So I heard you saying,
I know about the red light. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So the property I was talking about, the property I'm talking about, that's exactly what happened there. But what I related it to is, have you ever seen those people that wear the headlights and it's got the little red light?
Yeah.
I thought someone was in the woods walking. So I radioed, we had a group out there. I radioed to base camp and says, there's somebody up here, because I had two other guys behind me. And when I saw it, I come to a dead stop, and they both ran into the back of me. And I'm like, is anybody else up here? You know, everybody was at base camp. Everybody was accounted for. So whatever it was, and it, you know, it went from my right to my left and just then it went out of sight.
Well, I know for a fact this was not a person. It was moving. It was too steady. You know, like there was no movement, no walking.
Mm-hmm. Right,
and that's what this was. Just floating. It was just floating.
Mm-hmm.
And then after it was gone, that the steps up there, it was that typical. I stop, it stops. I stop, it stops.
Right.
And then I decided I posted up and put my back against a tree and just faced the ridge, hoping that since it was just enough light to see through the trees and see the ridge line, that I could get a glimpse of them going by. I was hoping I could wait them out and have them think they lost me and they could just keep moving and try to find me again.
Right.
I'm thinking it's a person up there. And then I sat there for 10 minutes and I was like, shoot, I don't hear nothing. I was like, all right. I turned around and started to walk again, and I was like, son of a gun. And I was like, and then I started thinking maybe it's my friends. So I yelled up there, hey, you know, doing something like that's a good way to get shot, you know, stuff like that. And then no one ever responded. And when I got close enough to camp, I could see the glowing from the fire up on the trees. And I said, screw this. And I just took off running because I was thinking, if they ain't going to get me and the animals, I was like, an animal would have got me already. Right. That's what I was thinking. Right. And I was like, and so I just took off running. And I came running into camp. And there's my two friends sitting by the fire drinking. And I was like, son of a bitch. I was like, it's not them.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I got one other question for you since you've been doing this before. I know you're trying to go, but I have another question because I had something happen to us in the woods. It sounded like a car door shut. Have you ever heard anything like that? I've heard one other person tell me, I know it's not a car door, but it makes the sound of a car door shutting.
I can't say that I have. I don't know about Gary.
I've heard a metal sound, and like two pieces, like a cattle gate. When two cattle gates come together, you know, have that metal clink. I've heard that, and on the same property that Billy was talking about, I heard Indian drums.
We were sitting around the fire, and we had one of my friends got my attention, and he said, "You hear that?" And I didn't. And then I heard like someone kind of like walking in the leaves back behind us. So we ended up, I'll make it shorter. We ended up turning around and like chasing it, and we could hear the steps, but we're shining our lights and we can't see nothing. Mm-hmm. And then we stopped and we were looking at each other like, what the hell? Because I asked him, my friend Omar, as we're running, I said, how is he running without running into anything?
Right.
You know, because I'm running with light. And I'm like, how is he running without? Because he's like fast running. And I'm like, how the hell? And then all of a sudden we hear like a car door go, kaboom, like it shut. And I said, what the? And I was like, did we turn? And he goes, no, we didn't turn. Because I was thinking there's a road back to my left.
Right.
And I pulled up my phone and I looked at it and he goes, you see anything? I was like, no. So I handed him the phone and he looked. I was like, we're nowhere near a road. And so I was like, I don't know what the hell. But that was that same hunting camp area that, you know, my friend heard the howl. And
it's just a question.
It's right there in Adairsville. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Just as a question with that, did you ever hear a vehicle crank up, stop, come into the area? Nothing, just the car door slamming. Just the
car door slamming. We never heard any like it crank up or leave the area. Nothing.
Do you think it could have been more of like a wood on wood, maybe like a wood knock?
I don't know. To me and him, but I know how, you know, groupthink works. If it's a weird sound and we can't place it, the moment I say something that's close to it, the other person will agree with you, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm the one that said it sounded like a car door shut. And he was like, oh my God, yeah, I heard it too, right? I heard the car door shut. That's what it was. I'm like, I don't know. It just sounded like it. So from then on, we call it the car door shut.
Right.
But it sounded like that. I'm pretty sure it's not a car because there was no cars. but
The
that's
only
the only
the
way I
only
know how to
thing
describe the sound.
the only thing that I can say for certain that I've heard are, wood on wood. That's many times. But again, you can't rule out human because you go to an area that Salt Fork is a good example. We all know that everybody and their brother knows about Salt Fork, and everybody and their brother's probably up there hitting a tree. So that I have heard strange vocalizations. When I say strange, I know what coyote sounds like. I know what all those sounds are. Things that I can't identify. I know all the owls. That's not an issue. I've heard rock clacks, what people consider. It's got that high pitched, like clink, clink. I've heard that, but I can't think of anything else. I mean, that's really about the only types of sounds I've heard.
That's what makes me a little irritated, is because I saw all my things, as far as I know, aren't like what you would call like Bigfoot typical related. I've had some strange incidences that I can't explain, and they're really weird. And but that's also what made me leave the door open for the possibility of, because I'm like, I know something's out there. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
With that being said, too, even with modern primates like a gorilla, a chest flap would have a similar sound to a car door slamming.
Yep.
Maybe it took its hand and smacked a hollow tree as it went by. I mean, it could have been, like you said, you have to try to rule out all of these other things that it could have been. And one, you didn't hear a car. Two, there was no vehicle. You would have seen tire tracks undoubtedly.
Well, there was no road.
Yeah, so I mean,
unfortunately, the problem is in the heat of the chase, when you hear something like that, you weren't prepared to listen for something.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, crap. I don't know what that was, but you can't unless it comes again.
Yeah, exactly.
And it didn't, because we weren't ready to hear anything. We were looking.
Right.
So, and I'm going to tell you something else too that I think is probably the strangest noise that I have ever heard in the woods is complete silence.
I've heard
that's something that new researchers don't really think about. They don't, somebody has to say, "Hey, it's really quiet."
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in the woods and you hear something, you hear complete silence. Something's going on.
Yeah, that happened. That's happened a couple times. One time with that group that I belong to, it happened, but it was 22 degrees out. It was the first night that it hit 22. And I think that was it was cold and nothing was moving. They were hunkering down for the night, because it like came out of nowhere. But, the night before it was like 32, 33. And then all of a sudden it just dipped to 22. And we were out there bundled up. And I'll tell you, when we sat down to be still and listen, I literally looked over at the guys and I said, "Dude, there's nothing out here. It's just us." I was like, it's too cold. Because, and you're right, that no noise was deafening. You're like, you can hear a leaf move, and you're like, and I'm like, man, I don't hear anything. I was like, this is insane. But yeah, right. I had those other times when I was turkey hunting when the forest went dead, and that was really unnerving. Because I was like, well, where's my crows? Where's my squirrels? Where's my birds? I don't hear nothing. Everything was just it was like it was gone. Everyone was just gone.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to think the first time it happened. I didn't get an uneasy feeling other than, whoa, that's weird. Like, what the hell happened? It was like someone flipped a switch and turned the sound off.
David, we appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, I feel like this has been very informative.
Great show.
It's been very scientific. It's been, the whole evidence collection, the whole discussion about footprints. I think this was very important, to really get out. So
Well, I appreciate
now,
it. Yeah.
are you
Whoever that
able
guy
to
was
hold
that
on?
asked all the questions is, I like him.
Oh yeah, David. Oh yeah.
David,
Oh yeah.
he's pretty serious.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, are you able to hang on while we close the show out, and then we'll come back and talk
Absolutely.
just a couple minutes? Okay.
Sure.
All right. So we want to thank everybody for coming on the show tonight. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. We will be back next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And until then, everybody have a great rest of the week. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
We are proud to announce that Sasquatch Watch Radio and the Bigfoot Investigative Group have joined forces. We are the exclusive podcast for Big. Tune in on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for a live video podcast each week. Sign up for our email list at squatchradio.com and subscribe to us on YouTube. Never miss an exciting episode. Sasquatch Watch Radio, the exclusive podcast for the Navy SEALs team of Big.